My name is Elizabeth Carrington. By the standards of most, I lead a charmed life. I reside in a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Greenwich, Connecticut, a mansion that boasts more rooms than I can count and a garden that rivals those found in European palaces. My husband, Jonathan, is a titan in the world of finance, a man who exudes confidence and commands respect. Our life is the epitome of opulence, extravagant parties, high-profile charity events, and vacations to the most exclusive destinations. But beneath this veneer of perfection lies a chasm of loneliness and yearning that even our millions cannot fill. Jonathan's ambition and drive, qualities that initially drew me to him, have since transformed into an all-consuming obsession with his work. Our marriage, once passionate and tender, has become a cold, sterile partnership. I am a mere ornament in his world, a trophy wife meant to be admired but not heard. It was during one of those long, languid summer afternoons that I first noticed him. Marco, the new gardener. Tall, with sun-kissed skin and a physique sculpted by years of hard labor, he was a striking contrast to the men in my social circle. There was an air of quiet strength about him, a sense of groundedness that I found intoxicating. As he worked, his shirt clinging to his muscular frame, I felt a stirring deep within me, a reawakening of desires long suppressed. I would watch him from the terrace, pretending to read a book while stealing glances at his life form moving effortlessly through the garden. His presence became a tantalizing escape from my gilded cage, a reminder of a world beyond the confines of my privileged existence. Our first encounter was almost mundane. I was wandering through the garden, admiring the vibrant blooms and meticulously manicured hedges, when I found him kneeling by a bed of roses, his hands deftly pruning the delicate flowers. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Carrington," he said, looking up with a warm smile. "Please call me Elizabeth," I replied, my voice betraying a hint of nervousness. "You must be Marco. The garden looks magnificent." "Thank you, Elizabeth. It's a pleasure to work here. Your garden is truly beautiful." There was a moment of silence as we both took in the sight of the roses, their petals of vivid crimson against the verdant backdrop. "Roses are my favorite," I said, almost to myself. "They're so delicate yet resilient." "Like you," he said softly, his eyes meeting mine. There was something in his gaze, an intensity that made my heart race. I quickly looked away, feeling a blush creep up my neck. "I should let you get back to work," I said, turning to leave. "Anytime you want to talk about the garden, I'm here," he called after me, his voice laced with an unspoken promise. Over the next few weeks, our interactions became more frequent. I found excuses to be in the garden, asking him questions about the plants, the soil, and the best times for pruning. He was always patient, his explanations detailed and passionate. But it was the way he looked at me, the way his eyes lingered on mine, that made my pulse quicken. One afternoon, as I stood by the fountain, watching the sunlight dance on the water, he approached me with a single rose in his hand. "For you," he said, holding it out. I took the flower, our fingers brushing against each other. The contact sent a jolt through me, a spark that ignited something deep within. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Elizabeth," he said, his voice low and earnest. "I know this is unprofessional, but I can't stop thinking about you. You're always on my mind." My breath caught in my throat. "Marco, we can't. I'm married." "I know," he said, stepping closer. "But I see the way you look at me. I feel it too." His words hung in the air, heavy with temptation and possibility. I knew I should walk away and end this before it went any further. But the yearning in his eyes mirrored my own, and I found myself unable to resist. The next thing, we were in his little room. His arms were all over me, and he showed me that he'd been yearning for me for a very long time. And he did it better than Jonathan. He knew exactly where to place his hands, where to kiss, and every moment with him was just amazing. We became adept at hiding our affair, our stolen moments woven into the fabric of my daily routine. In the early mornings, before the household stirred, we would meet in the greenhouse, the humid air thick with the scent of blooming orchids. There, amidst the vibrant flora, we would lose ourselves in each other, our passion a fierce, consuming force. By day, we maintained the facade of employer and employee. To the outside world, we were nothing more than two people who shared a love for the garden. But in the quiet corners of my estate, we were lovers, bound by a secret that both thrilled and terrified us. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, Marco led me to a secluded grove, a hidden sanctuary within the garden. A blanket was spread out on the grass, a picnic laid out with wine and cheese. "I wanted to do something special for you," he said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "It's beautiful," I said, touched by his thoughtfulness. We sat down, the world beyond our little haven fading away. As we sipped wine and talked about our dreams and fears, I felt a sense of connection I hadn't experienced in years. Marco listened to me, truly listened, his attention unwavering. "Elizabeth," he said, taking my hand in his, "I want to be with you, not just in secret, but truly with you." "Marco, I want that too, but it's complicated." "Jonathan, you'll never let me go." "Then we'll find a way," he said fiercely. "I can't stand the thought of you being unhappy. We'll figure it out together." His determination was infectious, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this gilded cage. As our affair deepened, so did the danger of discovery. Jonathan was a man who prided himself on his control and dominance, and the idea of his wife having an affair was unthinkable. He was often away on business trips, but his presence loomed large, a constant reminder of the life I was trapped in. One evening, as I was preparing for bed, Jonathan walked in, his expression unreadable. "Elizabeth, we need to talk," he said, his tone serious. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've noticed you've been spending a lot of time in the garden lately. Is there something you're not telling me?" My heart raced. Had he found out? "I've always loved the garden, Jonathan. It's my sanctuary." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Just be careful, Elizabeth. Some people would love to see us fail." His words sent a shiver down my spine. Was he warning me, or was it a veiled threat? Either way, I knew I had to be more careful. The next day, as I met Marco in the greenhouse, I told him about Jonathan's suspicions. "We need to be more discreet," I said, my voice trembling. "I can't lose you, but I can't risk Jonathan finding out." "We'll be careful," Marco assured me, his arms wrapping around me. "I promise." But despite our precautions, the tension was palpable. Every glance, every touch felt like it was under scrutiny. The thrill of our affair was tempered by the constant fear of being discovered. The tension between Jonathan and me grew, and our conversations strained and stilted. He became more watchful, his eyes lingering on me longer than usual, as if he could sense the growing chasm between us. One evening, as we were hosting a lavish dinner party, I caught a glimpse of Marco through the window, tending to the garden. Our eyes met, and for a brief moment, the world outside ceased to exist. It was a fleeting connection, but it was enough to reignite the fire within me. After the guests had left and Jonathan had retired to his study, I slipped out into the garden, my heart pounding with anticipation. Marco was waiting for me by the fountain, his expression a mix of longing and concern. "We can't keep doing this," I said, my voice breaking. "Jonathan is getting suspicious." "I know," Marco said, pulling me into his arms. "But I can't let you go. I love you, Elizabeth." Tears welled up in my eyes. "I love you too, Marco, but what are we going to do?" "We'll figure it out," he said, kissing me deeply. "I promise." The following days were a whirlwind of stolen glances and hurried whispers. We became experts at hiding our affairs, our meetings carefully planned and executed with precision. But the constant fear of discovery weighed heavily on us, casting a shadow over our happiness. One afternoon, as I was in the study going through some papers, I found a letter addressed to Jonathan. It was from a private investigator, detailing surveillance on me and Marco. My blood ran cold as I read the report, the photographs of us together, the detailed accounts of our meetings. Jonathan knew. He had been watching us all along. Confrontation was inevitable. That evening, Jonathan returned home earlier than usual, his face set in a mask of controlled fury. "Elizabeth, we need to talk," he said, his voice cold and clipped. I followed him into the study, my heart pounding in my chest. The door closed behind us with a definitive click, sealing us in a room thick with tension. "I know about you and the gardener," he said, throwing the private investigator's report onto the desk. "How long has this been going on? For how long have you been sleeping with this boy, damn it?" I struggled to find my voice. "Jonathan, I..." With that, he stormed out of the room, leaving me to collapse into a chair, my body shaking with sobs. Over the next few days, Jonathan's behavior became more erratic. He would disappear for hours at a time, returning with a cold, calculated look in his eyes. I knew he was plotting something, but I couldn't figure out what. Marco and I continued to meet in secret, our time together fraught with tension and fear. We knew we were running out of options, that Jonathan's retribution was imminent. "We need to leave," Marco said one evening, his voice urgent. "We can't stay here any longer. It's too dangerous. Your husband hasn't said anything to me. He is planning something." "But where will we go?" I asked, my mind racing. "Anywhere but here," he said. "We'll start over, build a new life together." The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. To leave behind everything I had ever known, to abandon the life of luxury for a chance at true happiness. It was a risk, but one I was willing to take. That night, as Jonathan slept, I packed a small bag with essentials and met Marco in the garden. We made our way to his truck, the night air thick with the scent of blooming flowers and the promise of freedom. As we drove away from the estate, I felt a sense of liberation I hadn't experienced in years. But the road ahead was uncertain, and I knew that our journey was far from over. Our escape was not without its challenges. Jonathan's reach was long, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he came after us. We traveled under the cover of night, staying in motels and keeping a low profile. Despite the fear and uncertainty, there was a sense of exhilaration in our newfound freedom. We were no longer bound by the constraints of our former lives, and each day brought new possibilities. We found a small town on the coast, far from the prying eyes of the world we had left behind. Marco found work at a local nursery, and I took up painting, a long-forgotten passion that brought me solace. Our life was simple, but it was ours. For the first time, I felt truly content, but the shadow of our past loomed large. One evening, as we were walking along the beach, Marco turned to me, his expression serious. "Elizabeth, we can't keep running. We need to confront Jonathan and end this once and for all." The idea filled me with dread, but I knew he was right. We couldn't live our lives in fear, always looking over our shoulders. We needed to face Jonathan to put an end to his pursuit. With a plan in place, we made our way back to Greenwich, the city that had once been our home. It was a risky move, but it was our only option. We arranged a meeting with Jonathan at a secluded spot, a place where we could confront him without interference. As we waited, my heart raced with anticipation and fear. When Jonathan arrived, his face was a mask of controlled fury. "You've made a mistake coming back," he said, his voice low and menacing. "We're here to end this," Marco said, stepping forward. "You need to leave us alone." Jonathan laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "You think you can just walk away from me? I own you, Elizabeth. You'll never be free." His words were like a dagger to my heart, but I stood my ground. "You don't own me, Jonathan. You never did. I deserve to be happy, to live my life without fear." The tension in the air was palpable, the silence deafening. It was a standoff, a battle of wills that would determine our future. In a sudden move, Jonathan lunged at Marco, his fists flying. The two men grappled, their struggle intense and brutal. I watched in horror, my heart in my throat. But Marco was strong, his determination fueled by his love for me. With a final powerful blow, he knocked Jonathan to the ground, his chest heaving with exertion. "Leave us alone," Marco said, his voice trembling with emotion. "If you ever come near us again, I won't hesitate to protect what's mine." Jonathan lay on the ground, defeated and humiliated. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. He knew he had lost. But suddenly, he reached for his small gun, what was in his shoe, and pointed at Mako. "You can't have her. She is mine. Nothing will ever change that." Before Marco could say anything, the next thing, Jonathan called his people. A black van took us away. That was the last time I saw Marco, and I don't even know if he survived that incident or not. But I'm back in my boring mansion again, and Jonathan turned into a monster. He says I'm his, and he can never let me go. Each time I try asking about Marco, he threatens to unalive me as well. Would you escape, or what would it do? Like and subscribe for more videos like these.